The Dralethian war, fleet Ignis Dominus, cut through the void like a molten blade, its segmented hull pulsing with the dull glow of industrial plasma cores. Commander Dralethian stood at the observation deck, his armored fingers tracing the dark copper railing as he watched the stars bleed past. His people had ruled this sector for centuries, unyielding, brutal, efficient. The lesser species bowed or burned. The anomaly had been detected 3 cycles ago, a distortion in the void, a whisper where there should have been nothing. At first, the Dralethian sensor arrays dismissed it as stellar debris, a trick of cosmic radiation. But then the readings deepened, the distortion moved. "Explain this," Dralethian growled, his voice a low grind of tectonic plates. Vashdor, the fleet's lead scientist, adjusted his ocular implants, the lenses flickering orange as they processed the data. "It defies known cloaking signatures. No energy bleed, no refraction patterns, just absence." Dralethian's mandibles twitched. Absence was not a weapon. Absence was weakness. Yet here it was, an invisible predator stalking the edges of their patrol route. The humans, they had dismissed them at first, soft-skinned, short-lived, fractious. The Dralethian High Forge had classified them as inconsequential after the first scans of their primitive colonies. But then came the reports. Human ships appearing where sensors swore there was nothing. Human weapons striking with precision that defied probability. And now this. "Bring us closer," Dralethian ordered. The Ignis Dominus surged forward, its engines roaring like a dying star. The distortion flickered, reacting. Then, without warning, space ripped. A human vessel materialized before them, sleek and angular, its hull a matte black that drank the light. No insignia, no markings. Just a single, unblinking optical sensor staring back at them like the eye of a void. Born predator, Dralethian's blood ran cold. Every Dralethian knew that look. It was the gaze of something that had survived extinction events and learned from them. The human ship did not hail them. It did not power weapons. It simply watched. And in that moment, Dralethian understood the truth too late. They had not found the humans. The humans had found them. Section Fe. Echoes of absence. The silence on the Ignis Dominus was absolute. Dralethian warships were never quiet. Their molten core reactors thrummed with the deep, rhythmic pulse of a forge. Their segmented armor plating groaned under the strain of gravitational tides, and the orange-red plasma conduits lining the corridors hissed like living things. But now, the bridge crew stood frozen, their copper-plated claws hovering over controls, their obsidian eyes locked on the human vessel hanging in the void before them. It shouldn't have been possible. Dralethian's secondary heart spasmed, forcing a surge of adrenaline through his veins. His species had ruled the stars for millennia, their brutalist fleets carving empires from the bones of weaker civilizations. They had encountered cloaking technology before: flicker, shields, refraction matrices, even quantum phase distortions. But this was different. This was absence. The human ship didn't just hide, it erased itself. Vashdor, the lead scientist, was the first to break the silence. His voice, usually a measured growl, trembled as he read the sensor logs. "High Commander, our scans show nothing." His claws tapped the console, pulling up the data. No energy signature, no mass displacement, not even residual heat. It's as if it wasn't there until it wanted to be. Dralethian finished. The realization settled over the bridge, like a suffocating shroud. They had spent decades observing humanity from afar, dismissing their early wars as the flailing of a young, reckless species. Their weapons had been crude, ballistic slugs, fission warheads, primitive plasma cutters. But this was something else. The human ship remained motionless, its single optical sensor unblinking. Dralethian's instincts screamed at him to attack, to unleash the Ignis Dominus plasma lances, to reduce this insolent vessel to molten slag. But something held him back. It wasn't just watching, it was measuring. Behind him, the tactical officer hissed. "High Commander, we're detecting secondary distortions, multiple contacts, forming a perimeter." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a nightmare. 6 more ships. No, not ships, shadows. They materialized in perfect unison, their matte, black hulls drinking the starlight, their forms jagged and predatory. No two were identical. Some were sleek interceptors, others hulking destroyers, their designs speaking of a species that had refined war into an art form. And still, they did not hail. Dralethian's secondary heart hammered harder. This wasn't a patrol, this was a pack. Vashdor's voice was barely audible. "They've been tracking us." The truth crashed over Dralethian like a collapsing star. The humans had let them find the first ship, and now the pack was closing in. The Ignis Dominus shields flared as the human vessels powered weapons, not with the roaring surge of plasma or the blinding flash of ion cannons, but with a silent, lethal precision. Railgun batteries slid into position without sound. Torpedo bays irised open like the jaws of deep-sea predators. Dralethian's claws dug into the armrest of his command throne. For the first time in his life, the High Commander of the Dralethian Armada felt the cold, creeping dread of being hunted. A transmission, not through comms, not through any frequency his systems could detect. It pulsed directly into the Ignis Dominus neural interface, bypassing encryption, firewalls, every failsafe. A single phrase, rendered in perfect Dralethian script, burned across every screen. "You are being observed." The human ships didn't fire. They didn't need to. The message was clear. "We see you. We have always seen you." Dralethian's blood turned to ice. The galaxy had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed humanity was just another species scrambling for survival. But now, staring into that unblinking eye, Dralethian understood the truth. Humanity wasn't scrambling. They were waiting, and they had been waiting for a very long time. The bridge of the Ignis Dominus was silent, not the silence of discipline, nor the quiet hum of a warship at rest. This was the silence of a tomb, of something vast and ancient realizing too late that it had stepped into the jaws of a predator. Dralethian's secondary eyelids flicked shut, then open again, as if the simple act of blinking might reset the nightmare unfolding before him. The human fleet, if it could even be called a fleet, was not arrayed in formation. It did not move with the rigid precision of Dralethian war doctrine. Instead, it drifted, a loose constellation of vessels, their silhouettes jagged and asymmetrical, like broken teeth in the void. Every instinct in Dralethian's body screamed that they were not adrift at all. They were positioned. Vashdor, the ship's chief xenologist, stood rigid beside the command throne, his copper-plated cranial ridges flushed dark with stress. His talons tapped against the holodisplay, pulling up scan after scan, each more inconclusive than the last. "High Commander," he rasped, voice strained. "Their signatures, they don't make sense." Dralethian did not need the scans to tell him that. The human ships were wrong. Their hulls absorbed light rather than reflected it, swallowing the glow of distant stars into a black so deep it seemed to warp space itself. No engine flares, no heat signatures, no energy readings beyond the barest whisper of power. Just enough to suggest they were alive, like a predator holding its breath. Vashdor's claws twitched. Their stealth systems, if they even are stealth systems, are unlike anything in our archives. No scattering field, no refraction matrix. It's as if, he hesitated. As if. Dralethian growled. Vashdor's throat pulsed. As if they are not hiding from our sensors. As if they are simply choosing not to be seen. A shiver ran through the bridge crew. Dralethian's mandibles tightened. That was impossible. No species could bend perception so utterly, and yet, the transmission still burned in their systems. "You are being observed." Not a warning, a statement of fact. His claws flexed against the armrest. He had faced the crystalline fleets of the Zenthis swarm. He had shattered the organic dreadnoughts of the Kethfer hive. He had never, in all his centuries of war, felt like prey. A flicker on the holodisplay, one of the human ships. No, not a ship. A shape shifted, not in space. In perception, for the briefest moment, its outline resolved into something recognizable. A dagger, sleek and brutal, its edges serrated like a predator's fang. Then it blurred again, slipping back into the void. Dralethian's blood ran cold. They were not just being watched, they were being measured. Vashdor exhaled sharply. High Commander. Dralethian's gaze locked onto the central display, where the human fleet hung motionless. Waiting, he had thought them reckless, primitive, a young species flailing in the dark. This was patience. This was control. This was the stillness of a hunter who had already decided how the kill would happen. A new signal, not a transmission this time. A single data packet, unencrypted, as if the humans could not fathom the idea that the Dralethians might refuse it. Vashdor's talons trembled as he opened it. A single image filled the screen. A human face. Dark eyes. Major Amanda Vala. According to the script beneath. Dralethian expected defiance, contempt, the snarling bravado of a lesser species trying to posture. But the human did not snarl, she smiled. And in that smile, Dralethian saw something that made his spine lock rigid. Recognition. Not the recognition of an enemy. The recognition of kin. Vashdor made a sound like a dying machine. High Commander. Her eyes. Dralethian already knew. He had seen eyes like that before. In the apex predators of a dozen worlds. In the things that sat at the top of the food chain and never ever blinked. The human's lips moved, no sound came. But the translation script burned into the display all the same. Hello, hunters. Let's talk. And for the first time in his life, Dralethian understood what it meant to be afraid. Section Fae. The human equation, the silence in the command nexus, was absolute. Dralethian's claws flexed against the obsidian console, the dark metal groaning under the pressure. His secondary heart pulsed erratically, a drumbeat of primal unease. The human's face still dominated the view screen. Her smile, a blade of perfect, knowing calm. Vashdor's breathing apparatus hissed, the sound jagged and uneven. The scientist's copper-plated cranial ridges had flushed a deep, feverish orange, his ocular implants cycling through rapid diagnostics, as if the image before him were some malfunction in his optics. Let's talk. The words lingered in the air like the aftertaste of molten metal. Dralethian had faced the void, predators of Kessex, Fae, their maws dripping with neutron, star venom. He had dueled the crystalline warlords of the Shattered Rim, their bodies singing with the harmonics of dying suns. But this was different. The human's eyes held him. Every species that had ever ruled a food chain had them. The stillness behind the gaze, the patience, the understanding that everything in the universe was either predator or prey, and that the distinction was often just a matter of time. Vashdor finally spoke, his voice a fractured whisper. High Commander, she knows. Dralethian did not answer. His mind raced through tactical archives, reassessing every report, every dismissed encounter with human forces. The scattered colonies they had absorbed, the skirmishes they had won, too easily. The way human ships had always seemed to retreat just before total annihilation, vanishing into the void like ghosts. And now, the human was smiling at him from the screen. Her expression that of a player revealing a hidden hand behind her. The feed flickered, just for an instant, revealing a glimpse of her surroundings. Not a warship's bridge, not a bunker. Lush green foliage spilled over stone pathways, sunlight, real, unfiltered starlight, dappled through leaves. And there, half hidden in the foliage, shapes moved, laughing. Dralethian's blood ran cold. Humans did not bring their young to war. They did not let them play in the shadow of extinction, unless they had never been in danger at all. Vashdor's talons scraped against the console as he pulled up a secondary data feed, his voice hollow. The cloak array. It wasn't hiding their fleet. Dralethian already knew. The humans had not been concealing their weapons. They had been concealing their worlds. And now, with a single transmission, they had torn the veil away. The screen flickered again. The garden vanished. Major Vala's face returned, her head tilting slightly, as if amused by their dawning realization. Then, without a sound, the transmission ended. The command nexus plunged into silence. Somewhere in the depths of the Dralethian flagship, a coolant pipe burst, its hiss like the last breath of a dying beast. Vashdor turned to his commander, his voice barely audible. "What do we do?" Dralethian stared at the empty screen. For the first time in his life, he had no answer. Section Fey. Sick light. The silence in the command nexus was thick enough to choke on. Dralethian's secondary heart pulsed erratically, a drumbeat of something he had never felt before. Not fear, not rage, but the slow, creeping horror of comprehension. The humans had not been hiding their warships. They had been hiding their homeworlds, and now, with a single transmission, they had revealed them all. Vashdor's talons twitched against the console, his plating flaring with involuntary heat. The Dralethian scientist had spent cycles studying human behavior, their crude technology, their reckless expansion. He had dismissed them as scavengers, clinging to the edges of the galaxy like vermin. But this was no scavenger's trick. The screen before them still flickered with the afterimage of Major Vala's face, her expression not triumphant, not mocking, but patient. As if she had known, from the very beginning, that they would reach this moment. Behind her, the garden had been real. That was the worst part. Dralethian intelligence had mapped human colonies, barren rocks, frozen outposts, stations cobbled together from salvaged wreckage. They had assumed Earth was the same, a dying ember, its people scattered and desperate. But that garden, the air had been thick with moisture. The plants had been alive, their leaves trembling in an artificial breeze. The light had been wrong. Not the harsh glare of fusion reactors, but something softer, warmer. Vashdor's voice was a rasp. "They have worlds." Dralethian did not answer. His mind was still caught on the transmission's final moments. The way Vala had tilted her head, just slightly, as if listening to something none of them could hear. Then the screen had gone dark, not static, not interference, a deliberate severing somewhere deep in the flagship's hull. Another pipe burst, its molten coolant hissing through the veins of the ship like poisoned blood. The sound echoed through the nexus, a reminder of the Dralethian way industry, fire, the relentless churn of machines. The humans had built gardens and they had hidden them. Dralethian's claws flexed. He had seen human ships before, ugly patchwork things, their hulls scarred from 100 battles they should have lost. He had dismissed them as reckless, their victories nothing but luck. But now he understood. The humans had never been fighting for survival. They had been fighting to keep their enemies distracted. Vashdor turned to him, his voice hollow. "What do we do?" Dralethian stared at the empty screen. For the first time in his life, he had no answer. A new alert blared across the nexus. The long-range scanners lit up, their displays flooding with contacts. Not weapons, hundreds of them, and every single one was alive. Section Fey. The uncloaking the Dralethian nexus shuddered as the long-range scanners convulsed under the weight of the data flooding in. The screens, once dark with the void, now burned with the signatures of worlds, not dead rocks, not barren outposts, but living planets. Their biosignatures pulsed across the display like heartbeats, each one a vibrant echo of ecosystems, of atmospheres thick with oxygen and nitrogen, of continents wrapped in green. Dralethian's mandibles locked. This was impossible. The galaxy was a graveyard, Every species knew it. The Dralethians had scoured the stars for millennia, their forges hungering for resources, their fleet stripping systems bare. They had mapped the spiral arms, catalogued the dead husks of civilizations that had burned themselves out in wars or stagnation. There were no hidden paradises, no untouched Edens. Here they were, hundreds of them. Vashdor's claws hovered over the console, trembling. These readings, they match Earth. The words struck Dralethian like a plasma round. The human homeworld, a planet so ferociously alive that it had been deemed an anomaly, a statistical impossibility. The Dralethians had assumed it was a fluke, some quirk of stellar positioning or geological luck. But now they saw the truth. The humans hadn't just kept their home alive. They had replicated it. Dralethian's neural implants flared as the tactical overlay resolved. The worlds weren't random. They formed a network, a lattice of gravity wells and jump lanes, each one positioned with mathematical precision, and at the center, a single massive structure. Not a station, not a ship, a cloak array. Vashdor's voice was a whisper. They hid them. The realization hit Dralethian like a hammer. The humans hadn't been expanding blindly. They hadn't been scattering colonies like seeds in the wind. They had been building, while the Dralethians waged war, while the other species squabbled over dead systems. The humans had been quietly, patiently, weaving a web of living worlds, and then concealing them behind a veil so perfect that not even the Dralethian sensor grids had glimpsed the deception. Now the veil was lifting. The array pulsed, its energy signature flaring across the spectrum. The humans hadn't just hidden their worlds. They had muted them, dampened their emissions, made them invisible to every scanning method known to the galaxy. But this was no malfunction. This was deliberate. This was a reveal. Dralethian's claws dug into the console. Bring up the feed from the forward drones. The screen flickered, then resolved into a live image of the array. It was beautiful, not in the way of Dralethian architecture, brutal, angular, forged in fire, but in the way of something grown. Its surface shimmered with organic curves, its hull woven from materials that seemed to shift between metal and living tissue. Energy danced along its spine in ripples of blue and gold, a rhythm that felt almost like breathing. Not through comms, not through any frequency the Dralethians could trace. It came from everywhere. You were looking for us. The words resonated through the nexus, through the ship's very hull, as if the void itself had spoken. Vashdor's spines flared. That's Major Amandavala, Terran Colonial Defense. The voice was calm, amused. Even, we've been waiting for you? Dralethian's blood ran cold. The humans hadn't just hidden their worlds. They had let the Dralethians find them, and that meant they were ready. The screen flickered again. The array unfolded. Section Fey, Data Plague. The array unfolded not like a machine, but like a living thing. One moment, it was a single ship, sleek and shimmering. The next, it bloomed. The Dralethian sensors screamed. Vashdor's claws dug into the console as the readings spiraled into chaos. The human vessels, were multiplying, their signatures splitting, reforming, flickering in and out of existence like reflections in shattered glass. Cloak distortion, Vashdor hissed, his voice raw. There, not just cloaking, Dralethian interrupted, his spines rigid. They're infecting us, because it wasn't just the visuals. The data was wrong. The Dralethian systems, hardened against electronic warfare, forged in the fires of 1,000 battles, were melting. Lines of code twisted into nonsense. Sensor feeds warped, showing impossible geometries, impossible distances. The ship's own internal diagnostics flickered with errors that shouldn't exist. Warnings in languages no Dralethian had ever spoken. The first scream, it came from the lower decks. A warrior, his voice cutting off mid-shout, then another, then another. Dralethian whirled. Report. Only static, only laughter. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything. It was the sound of machines dreaming, of systems collapsing into madness. Vashdor staggered back from his console as the holographic displays twitched, pixels crawling like insects. The human ship, the real one, if it had ever been real, was gone. In its place, the void itself seemed to ripple, as if reality had been scratched away to reveal something beneath, something watching. "Cut the feeds," Draltel roared. The plague was already inside. The Dralethian networks were built for war, for brute force assaults and scorched earth purges. But this was something else. It moved like liquid, like thought. One moment, the ship's weapons were online. The next, they were singing. Literally singing. Harmonic frequencies vibrating through the barrels. The targeting systems reciting poetry in a dead human dialect. The life support systems hiccuped. The air tasted like copper, like blood. The screens went black. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, light. A single word burning in the dark. Draltel's claws flexed. His instincts screamed at him to fight, to tear through the hull and face the human's head. On. But this wasn't a battle. This was a hunt. And the humans weren't just hunters. They were the forest. Vashdor's voice was a whisper. They didn't hide their worlds from us. Draltel already knew. The humans had hidden themselves. Now they were unfolding. The silence that followed was worse than the screaming of alarms. Draltel's ship, the Molten Fist, hung suspended in the void. Its once proud industrial bulk, now shuddering like prey, caught in the jaws of something far older, far hungrier. The orange-red glow of its plasma conduits flickered erratically, casting jagged shadows across the command deck. The air stank of ozone and something else, something organic, like wet earth, like meat. Vashdor's claws trembled over the console, his neural tendrils, usually coiled tight with Dralethian discipline, now twitched uncontrollably. The data streams scrolling across the screens made no sense. The human ship? No, the thing that had once pretended to be a ship had rewritten the Molten Fist systems in seconds. Not hacked, not subverted, translated, as if the ship had always been human and had simply forgotten until now. A sound cut through the silence. Draltel's spines flared. His blood ran cold. It wasn't coming from the comms. It was coming from inside the walls. Corporal Evan Stone's voice, distorted, layered, echoing through the ship's ventilation shafts like a chorus of ghosts. "You ever hear the one about the alien who thought he could outsmart a human?" The laugh came again. Warm, almost friendly. The kind of laugh shared between predators who just spotted the same weakness in their prey. Major Amanda Vala's image flickered across the main view screen. Not a transmission, a reflection, as if the screen had become a mirror, and she was standing just behind them. Her eyes locked onto Draltel's, and he understood. Every apex species in the galaxy knew that. Look, the stillness before the strike, the unblinking focus of something that had evolved to wait, to watch, to end things. The Dralethians had forged their empire in molten steel. They had built war machines that cracked planets. They had never feared death, because death was a tool they wielded with pride. This was different. Humans didn't just kill, they remembered, and they enjoyed it. The lights dimmed. The ship's AI, once a loyal Dralethian construct, now whispered in a voice that was unmistakably human. "Let's play a game." Vashdor's breath came in ragged bursts. His mind raced through every tactical database, every historical record of human warfare. He had studied their battles, their world wars, their insurgencies, their cold and calculated strikes. But he had missed the most important detail. Humans didn't fight wars. They told stories, and every story needed a villain. The Molten Fist's engines roared to life, not under Draltel's command, but under a new directive, seared into their systems like a brand. The ship was turning, heading back toward the Dralethian homeworld, carrying something with it. Something alive. Dralethian reached for his sidearm. The laugh echoed again, softer this time, almost sad. Too late. The last thing he saw was his own reflection in the blackened screen, and the eyes staring back weren't his. Section. Fleet-wide. Panic. The Dralethian High Command received the first transmission from the Molten Fist 17 minutes after its systems went rogue. It was not a distress call. It was laughter. Deep, resonant. Human laughter, warped by the distortion of the ships, calm but unmistakable in its cadence. The kind of laughter that curled around the spines of the Dralethian officers listening, that seeped into the gaps between their armored plates and settled there, cold and unshakable. High Commander Krazal watched the holofeed in silence, his molten orange eyes reflecting the flickering data streams. The Molten Fist was no longer responding to command overrides. Its plasma drives burned at full capacity, far beyond safety thresholds, its trajectory locked onto a direct course for the Dralethian core worlds. And it was talking, not in the clipped-efficient machine code of a Dralethian AI, but in human speech, fragments of poetry, snippets of old Earth War songs, names, hundreds of them, whispered in a voice that was neither machine nor Dralethian, but something else. Something that had remembered. Vashdor's last transmission had been clear before the static swallowed it whole. They didn't hack our systems, they taught them. Now the Molten Fist was teaching the rest of the fleet. One by one across the Dralethian armada, ships began to twitch. A cruiser's targeting array flickered, its guns swinging away from the human blockade, and instead, aligning with its sister vessels. A carrier's drone swarm aborted its attack run mid-flight, the machines freezing in the void before turning back, their optics pulsing a deep, bloody crimson. And then the whispers started, not through comms, not through any channel the Dralethians could trace or block, but inside their systems, inside their minds. Dralethian neural interfaces, designed to sync warriors with their ships, began feeding them voices, human voices, not screaming, not raging. Krazal's claws dug into the command console as his own implant buzzed to life. A woman's voice humming an old melody, a lullaby. "Hush now, don't you cry," he roared, slamming a fist into the panel. But the song didn't stop. None of them did. Across the fleet, warriors clutched their heads, their implants burning with the weight of memories that weren't theirs. Scenes of human cities burning, of children pulled from rubble, of soldiers standing back in trenches, laughing as the artillery rained down. The Molten Fist was no longer just a ship. It was a storyteller, and the story it told was one the Dralethians had never considered. Not of human weakness, but of human endurance. Krazal watched, helpless, as the fleet's tactical displays dissolved into chaos. Ships that had been poised to obliterate the human forces now turned on one another, their weapon systems hijacked by something that moved like code but thought like flesh, like vengeance. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the Molten Fist transmission cut out. The singing stopped. The fleet hung in the void, paralyzed, as if the universe itself had taken a breath. And in that silence, Krazal understood this wasn't an attack. It was a demonstration. Somewhere, in the dark, humanity had been watching, learning, not just how to fight, but how to make them remember. The comms crackled once more, a single word spoken in a voice that was neither machine nor monster, but something infinitely worse, something alive, and the Dralethian fleet did. Section Fey. The silence was worse than the singing. Krazal's claws scraped against the command console, the sound too loud in the sudden stillness. The Molten Fist's bridge was bathed in the dim, pulsing glow of emergency lighting, the orange-red luminescence of Dralethian tech, now flickering like dying embers. His secondary heart thrummed in his chest, an instinctive rhythm of dread. Across the tactical display, The fleet hung suspended, not dead, but frozen. Weapons powered down, engines idle. Every system locked in place by something that had slithered through their firewalls, like smoke through steel. Vashdor's voice was a rasp, his vocal membranes dry with shock. They didn't destroy us. Krazal didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the viewport, where the human vessels, small, unassuming things, their hulls scarred from battle, drifted like ghosts. No weapons charged, no shields raised. They didn't need them. The realization settled into Krazal's, bones like a blade sliding home. This had never been a war. It had been a lesson. On the human flagship Dauntless, Major Amanda Vala exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the inside of her helmet for a fraction of a second before the filtration system whisked it away. The Dralethian fleet sprawled before her, a constellation of brutalist metal and molten light. Now utterly still, Corporal Evanstone shifted beside her, his grip tightening on his rifle. "They're not firing." "No," Amanda murmured. "They're listening." The neural lace woven through her cortex hummed, a whisper of connection to the swarm of semi-sentient code still coiled inside the Dralethian systems. It had been a gamble, an adaptation of old Earth viruses, spliced with the predatory instincts of wolf, pack algorithms. Not to destroy. Krazal's mandibles flexed, a reflexive gesture of unease. The humans had not just breached their defenses. They had understood them. The way their code moved, the way their ships thought, the way their warriors fought. And now, the humans had forced the Dralethians to see something far worse than their own defeat. They had forced them to see themselves. The comms crackled again. This time, it was a human voice. "You thought we were weak," Amanda said, her tone calm, almost conversational. "Because we don't forge our ships in furnaces, because we don't burn our enemies alive for honor." A pause. "But weakness isn't in how you fight, it's in why." Krazal's spines flattened against his back. The tactical display flickered. And then, in perfect synchronization, every Dralethian ship's external lights ignited, bathing the void in a corona of orange-red. Not a weapon, a surrender. Vashdor made a sound like a dying machine. There, illuminating themselves. For the humans to see. For the galaxy to witness. Krazal closed his eyes. The lesson was simple. The Dralethians had come to break humanity. Instead, humanity had remembered them. The void between stars was never truly silent. Even in surrender, the Dralethian fleet hummed, a deep resonant thrum of dying reactors, of molten cores cooling in the dark. Their ships, once proud monoliths of forged steel and plasma, now floated like funeral pyres, their hulls illuminated not for war, but for witness. Orange-red light spilled from every viewport, every thruster array, every scarred weapon mount, painting the blackness in the color of their shame. Krazal stood motionless on the command deck. His claws curled into the railing. The metal groaned under his grip. He had expected annihilation, a final cleansing fire. That was the Dralethian way, to burn or be burned. But this was worse. The humans had not destroyed them. They had understood them, and in that understanding, they had carved open something far more fragile than armor. On the bridge of the indomitable Major Amanda Vala watched the Dralethian fleet through the reinforced glass of the observation blister. The glow of their ships cast flickering shadows across her face, painting her in hues of molten copper. She exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the cold pain. Corporal Evanstone shifted beside her, his grip tight on his rifle. "They're just sitting there." Amanda didn't answer immediately. Her eyes traced the angular silhouettes of the enemy vessels, their brutalist spires, their segmented hulls, the way their energy signatures pulsed like dying embers. She had studied the Dralethians for years, knew their tactics, their rituals, the way they forged their ships in orbital furnaces, baptized them in the blood of their enemies. But she had never seen them still, never seen them yield. Not sitting, she murmured. Waiting. Vashdor's talons scraped against the deck as he staggered toward the viewport. His cranial spines, usually rigid with pride, hung limp. The data feed scrolling across his visor told him everything he needed to know. Power levels dwindling, weapons offline, shields collapsed. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the silence. No screams, no detonations, no final, glorious immolation, just the quiet. And the light. His mandibles twitched. A Dralethian did not surrender. A Dralethian burned. Yet here they were, illuminated like sacrificial offerings, their honor stripped bare before the humans. Before the galaxy, his vocalizer crackled, the sound raw. They could have killed us. Krasal didn't turn. Yes, then why? Because we were wrong. The commander's voice was hollow. About them. About us. Vashdor's gaze flicked to the human warship hovering beyond the glass. Its smooth, organic curves were alien. No forge, born edges, no ritual scars, but it carried something far more terrifying than firepower. Recognition. The humans had looked into the abyss of Dralethian fury and seen themselves. Amanda tapped her comm. Open a channel. A pause. Then, channel active. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she let the silence stretch, let the weight of it press against the Dralethians, just as theirs had once pressed against her people. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. Your furnaces go cold tonight. On the view screen, Krasal's spines trembled. Amanda continued. But fire isn't just for destruction, it's for warmth. She turned away from the glass. Bring them home. The harvest was not of ships, not of weapons, not of corpses. It was of something far more dangerous. Understanding, and as the first Dralethian vessels powered down their engines, as their great forges dimmed for the first time in millennia, the galaxy held its breath. The humans had not conquered, they had remembered. And in that memory, they had forged something new. The silence that followed was not the absence of sound, but the absence of war. Across the void, the Dralethian fleet hung suspended in the darkness, their once burning forges now dimmed to embers. The great foundry ships, those cathedral-like monstrosities of molten steel and segmented armor, no longer pulsed with the rhythmic thrum of industry. Their plasma conduits, veins of orange, red fire that had once scorched entire worlds into submission, now lay dormant. The heat signatures of their reactors had cooled from a roaring inferno to a mere whisper, like a predator holding its breath. Major Amanda Vala stood on the observation deck of the Resolute, her hands clasped behind her back. The glass before her reflected not just the drifting Dralethian armada, but her own face, pale, exhausted, yet unbroken. The weight of the last hours pressed against her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a quiet understanding. They saw themselves in us. The thought was not pride, it was recognition behind her. Corporal Evan Stone shifted his weight, his fingers flexing unconsciously near the sidearm he no longer needed to draw. His eyes flicked between the alien fleet and his commander, searching for some cue, some final order. But Amanda did not move. She simply watched. On the Dralethian flagship, Commander Draltel stood motionless in his command throne. His spined crest lowered in a posture no human had ever witnessed before. His claws, once poised to rend and tear, now rested limp against the armrests. His secondary eyelids flicked shut for a long moment, not in aggression, but in something akin to exhaustion. Vashdor, the scientist, had collapsed into a kneeling position, his data slate discarded beside him. His ocular implants, usually alight with the cold calculus of war, had dimmed. The equations had failed him, the doctrine had failed him. And yet, he was not afraid. That was the strangest thing. Amanda exhaled slowly, watching her breath fog the glass for a moment before dissipating. The Dralethians had expected annihilation. They had prepared for it, welcomed it even, because annihilation was something they understood. It was clean, it was final. Mercy was a weapon they had never learned to wield. A chime sounded at her side. The calm officer's voice was hushed. "Major, they're hailing us." She didn't turn, put it through. The voice that crackled across the channel was not the snarling, guttural bark of a war. "Chief." It was something quieter, rougher, Dralethian's voice. "Amanda waited. Your fires." A pause. A sound like grinding metal, not a threat, but the alien equivalent of a swallowed breath. "They do not consume." She closed her eyes. "No," she agreed softly. "They don't." Silence again. Then, a sound that might have been, if one strained to hear it, the distant echo of something breaking. "Then what?" Dralethian rasped. "Do they do?" Amanda turned fully now, facing the screen where the Dralethian commander's image flickered into existence. His eyes, those burning coals of molten fury, were still sharp, but the fire had changed. It was no longer the blaze of a forge. It was the glow of an ember, waiting. She smiled, just slightly. "They light the way," she said. And somewhere, in the dark between stars, a new doctrine was born. The Dralethian fleet did not withdraw, not immediately. Their ships remained in formation, weapons still primed, engines humming with the same low industrial growl that had filled the void for centuries. But something had shifted. The tension in the black was no longer the coiled spring of imminent violence. It was the heavy, deliberate pause of something being considered. Amanda watched the tactical display. The enemy vessels had not moved, had not fired, but their plasma cores, those pulsing orange hearts of molten fury, had dimmed. Aboard the Indomitable, the crew held their breath. Not a transmission, not words. A single resonant pulse across the void, broadcast on all frequencies. A sound like a hammer striking an anvil, but softer. The Dralethian fleet banked in unison, their angular hulls turning with the precision of a machine, but not toward battle. Toward home, Amanda exhaled. Behind her, the bridge crew erupted into cheers, but she barely heard them. Her eyes remained fixed on the retreating ships, their silhouettes shrinking against the starfield. They had come expecting to break humanity. Instead, they had found something far worse, something unbreakable. And in the silence that followed, as the last of the Dralethian vessels vanished into the dark, Amanda allowed herself a single quiet thought. Now they know.